Hi, I'm Corey Kiesewetter, Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Forcepoint, and today I'm here to talk to you about SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. Now, this is a concept that's been fairly popular for the last few years, and I wanted to help bring a little bit of explanation to this, demystify it a little bit, get past the marketing speak so that we can get our hands on the concept a little more and get some practical tips on how to leverage SASE, leverage this architecture to simplify security operations for your organization. So a lot of you that may be listening to this or watching me today are probably already a little bit familiar with SASE and aware of the fact that it is a concept articulated first by Gartner in late 2018, early 2019. And I want to highlight a quote directly from Gartner. They republished some of the advice from their initial publication again this year in a article or a publication entitled the Gartner Market Guide for Single Vendor SASE. And we have licensed this Gartner Market Guide so that all of you watching can go download it and read through the full details and get the advice directly from the experts. But one of the quotes that stood out to me, at least, as a key reason why SASE is seeing so much prominence is what we have on the screen right here. I'm going to go through this quote in detail and help try to explain some of the value behind what's really going on, what this is putting together. So as Gartner has explicitly stated here, SASE can help organizations. The value that SASE provides is helping organizations adopt a zero trust security posture, and doing so by applying consistent identity and context-based policies. So again, we're providing consistency across the organization by leveraging identity and context with what users are doing to base security decisions and security policies on those parameters. Now, if you're familiar with zero trust, you'll understand or remember that zero trust calls for moving away from your network location as a key parameter. Hey, my IP address is XYZ, therefore I should have access. Zero trust says, no. We, instead of granting access simply based on somebody's IP address or their location on the network, we need to actually authenticate them, understand their identity, as well as context. Are they a malicious user? Are they trying to do something inappropriate with sensitive information? Are they going to malicious sites and downloading malware? All these are context-based indicators and identity-based indicators. Are they even somebody in the organization that's allowed to have access to that resource? These are all captured by the idea of a consistent identity and context-based security policy, regardless of the type of resource the user is trying to access. Now, think about your own organization. The general average user gets most of their work done leveraging business applications, whether they're in the cloud or private on-prem data centers. They need access to business applications and typically the internet. Especially for those SaaS apps, you need access to the internet to get to those, but also to do research. Maybe you're researching some information about a client before delivering a proposal to them. You need to be able to access that information on the given internet, as well as put together any of your own internal information on those private resources. But how do you, one of the issues rather, that a lot of organizations have seen, especially since the pandemic and going remote, seeing a hybrid workforce, is how do I give remote users access to this information and still retain the same type of control that I used to have when everything was on-prem, including the user and the application? And in a large part, that's what this whole problem, the challenge for most organizations really comes down to. How do I now, in this brave new world that we're living in, where everything's remote, anywhere, anytime access, how do I ensure that same amount of control and security that I used to have as an organization back in the day when people could only access an application by being in that site at that location where the application was running? So again, going back to this quote, SASE helps organizations adopt zero trust by applying consistent identity and context-based policies regardless of the type of resource the user is accessing, whether the internet, cloud services, or private applications. Security policy management can be simplified by applying the same inspection mechanisms for sensitive data and malware across all access mechanisms, and by shifting towards identity-centric policies rather than network location. Now, there's a lot of really good information in this guide, so please go to forcepoint.com/SASE, S-A-S-E, and check out this Gartner market guide and get the full details. Again, we're licensing this for your benefit. Please go take advantage of it. As I went through that quote and trying to pull the threads on that to explain a little more, I'm sure you acknowledged or noticed a few patterns. Things that were challenging for organizations before the idea of SASE came about. Things that caused frustration for security admins, for network admins, the CISO, CIO, and indeed the whole C-suite, the operations team, as well as the CEO and the IT teams. How do we, as an organization in the modern day and age, thrive? How do we instill resilience in our organization so that we can adapt to things like the pandemic or changing supply chains? Part of it is the anywhere, anytime workforce and resources being able to be anywhere, up in the cloud, so that you have kind of ubiquitous access. No matter where your people are, they always have performant, fast, accessible access to those resources. However, many of you are very aware that when the pandemic forced us to do a lot of these things, we didn't have consistency. We had to drum up new security controls for resources in the cloud that fragmented our security between resources in the cloud and resources on-prem. Likewise, with our users, security and access were both fragmented based on where a user was accessing a resource from. And likewise, sensitive data controls like DLP, data loss prevention, a lot of times were siloed. Only the largest of organizations typically have very robust DLP programs with a full retinue of experts creating regex expressions and implementing DLP controls across the various channels that they can. One of the problems has always been this fragmented sensitive data visibility. So moving workloads to the cloud might mean more accessibility for remote users, but a lack of sensitive data control. And so organizations would work to build DLP controls in the cloud, but a lot of times they weren't consistent between the cloud and on-prem, or consistent across a worker accessing those from one location or another. And likewise for threat visibility. A lot of organizations lack the ability to identify malware consistently across their resources, their workloads, and across users. They would have one tool on the endpoint, a separate tool in cloud applications, and another tool for internal applications, and yet another tool at the firewall, for example. This fragmentation across visibility, across users, across resources can make security a bit of a hassle. It makes the work of our administrators extremely challenging. This complexity is killing a lot of organizations. And what's worse is there's a shortage of IT professionals, especially cybersecurity professionals. And with the Great Resignation, which seems to be more about people moving jobs than just quitting altogether, there's still a lack of there are more job openings for cybersecurity than there are professionals to fill them. Let's put it that way. And with all of this complexity, it makes the job even harder. So, given this state of affairs, the market in general is looking for a unified platform, a smarter way of doing things. The old adage, let's work smarter, not harder. That's what SASE is all about. It's about answering all of these challenges with one tool. So you can, hit two birds with one stone sort of thing. We can hit sensitive data control. You can hit malware prevention. You can hit identity-based access control to all work resources consistently, as well as consistent user experience, whether they're in the office or at home or traveling. That's what SASE is about, bringing together all of the pieces with expertise at each level, with expertise on the networking side, with expertise on the security side, with the web gateways, the cloud access gateway, and the ZTNA gateway, to bring all the pieces together so that security administrators and IT admins can set up a DLP policy once and enforce it everywhere to ensure consistent control so that no matter where your users are located, no matter what applications they need to access to get their job done, they can do it quickly with high performance, but also be able to do so in a way that retains control of sensitive information and keeps malware out of the organization. It maintains the integrity of those resources that belong to you as an organization and help maintain that high productivity even in the face of challenges like remote work or a fast move to the cloud. And accelerated cloud adoption is something that we see more and more often to help with things like a distributed workforce. Again, these are all addressed with one unified platform, a secure access service edge platform. And so at Forcepoint, we look at SASE or we break SASE down rather into 5 steps. We want to make this as simple as possible for you as an organization to understand SASE, put your hands around it, integrate that architecture into your organization so that you can see better productivity, faster performance, more visibility, and more control that is consistent across all channels. Wherever your users and applications or resources come into contact with each other, you need to have zero trust control that's easy to manage. That's what SASE promises, and that's what SASE can deliver if it is truly unified. So when we talk about the Forcepoint's 5 steps to SASE, we're breaking things down to first protect sensitive data in the cloud with the CASB gateway, and protecting sensitive information in the cloud with a cloud access security broker, CASB, isn't just about the cloud application itself or the data that's in there. It is also about the ways in which all of your users can access that data. Because when it's an employee, a lot of times they're on managed devices. You might have more avenues to control things. However, no organization exists siloed, walled off from partners or customers for that matter, or people that they serve. In order to serve your users, your partners, your customers, you need to give them access. But you know that you're not going to be able to manage their devices. So being able to serve sensitive data in the cloud appropriately while limiting access and ensuring that information cannot leak down to unmanaged devices from those cloud applications, that's a real tangible value that SASE can provide if your SASE solution is properly architected. Now, likewise, the ability to extend that same type of control, a identity-based access control to cloud applications with inline protection to prevent malware getting into the resource and also prevent sensitive information from inappropriately leaving the resource. In order to do that for internal applications, we have ZTNA. SASE specifically calls for ZTNA in lieu of or in place of VPNs, because VPNs, yes, from a user standpoint, they're not fun. They slow things down. People are only on them as long as they have to be, and then you jump off because they're not a good user experience. But even worse than that, they're risky. All you need is somebody else's credentials to get onto the VPN. Then you have lateral access to everything else on that network. And you can run a port scan, see what else is on there, and then start going after those resources inside the private network that you may not even, or rather the credentials that may have been stolen might not even have access to, but through certain mischief, you can find and identify additional resources on those virtual LANs or those network segments and start going after those and start trying to escalate privileges to get access to things that you shouldn't have access to. In order to clamp all that down to prevent that risk, that overwhelming exposure, while also giving your users a better user experience, ZTNA is the alternative to VPNs to fix all of those issues. And what SASE promises and what SASE can deliver if it's architected correctly is a uniform control so that you as an organization, it doesn't matter if an application's in the cloud or private. You've got the same controls for it. You've got the same identity-based access controls for users accessing that, whether they're on the network or not. And you've got the same inline protections to stop malware from corrupting that application and also to stop sensitive data from leaving it inappropriately so that you can make sure, for example, that sensitive data can only leave that application to go to a managed device where you are able to instill controls around that sensitive data. And if it's an unmanaged device, they only can access it in the application. That sort of uniformity and consistency across CASB and ZTNA is one of the big values of a SASE platform. But it doesn't stop there. One of the original reasons why we started seeing convergence between some of these separate security platforms was because of some of the unique use cases around SaaS applications. And what I'm talking about here is the convergence between CASB and SWG. Now, if an organization manages an application, a cloud app, then you can control it with CASB. But as we saw with the pandemic, a lot of users will consume what we call shadow IT, unsanctioned cloud applications. For example, Slack. A lot of users, when they're not in the office every day, started downloading Slack on their work laptops and using that to communicate with colleagues, to stay in touch, just like you would have if you were in the office in person. However, these things being unsanctioned means organizations might have a harder time wrapping controls around them, especially things like sensitive data controls, inline DLP. How do you put inline DLP around an application that you don't manage? Well, one way is if you manage the end user's device. But if you don't manage that device, you still have a route to control if you manage the network. So both of these, I'm speaking to the web security piece. If you are able to implement web security controls or a SWG, a secure web gateway, to protect either users on managed devices or users at a managed location where you manage the network policies and can send traffic to a gateway, then you can wrap your security policies around the internet at large and maintain inline DLP controls, for example, ensure things like malware aren't leaking from these unsanctioned applications and risky websites into your organization. And I believe a true mature SASE platform takes this a step further to actually implement zero trust on the web channel with what I'm calling zero trust web access, which is using things like browser isolation technology and content disarm and reconstruction to ensure even risky, unknown, uncategorized, or straight up malicious websites and malicious downloads can be interacted with, can be viewed and even downloaded risk-free. And that's what RBI and CDR can bring to the table for web security. But the synergy of having that web security and CASB sharing the same DLP policies, the same malware policies, the same identity-based access controls can ensure that you have consistent protection and full visibility whether users are sharing or interacting with information in a private application, in a cloud application that you manage, or in shadow IT. And the fourth point, well, you've heard it throughout the mention of the other three. It's that consistency with which we're able to administer DLP, and not just DLP light where I've got a few patterns, but strong DLP that has a robust set of predefined patterns so you can get quick value out of the solution right from the first day, but also the capabilities to expand and cover, more advanced cases, whether that's exact data matching at with a very large scalability into the hundreds of millions of rows. Any true mature SASE platform can do this for you. And with the fifth point here, improving the security and connectivity of remote sites with secure SD-WAN. And here's really where the networking side is coming into full power in the SASE concept. It's bringing those remote sites or those distributed sites in connection with each other in a consistent manner with the security controls in the SSE side of things, the SWIG, the CASB, the ZTNA, being able to utilize common identity constructs across these, common DLP and malware constructs across all of these to ensure faster connectivity and more security, even with a smaller workforce. All right, that does it for today's conversation on SASE. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at corey.kiesewetter@forcepoint.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.